Our speaker today is Rozella Kennedy. Rozella Kennedy is a dynamic and accomplished professional with a diverse background in strategic development, communications, marketing, and organizational leadership. She works with individuals, groups, and organizations to enhance collaboration, leadership acumen, personal allyship, and intercultural intelligence. Solutions help clients strengthen their ability to identify and mitigate bias, blind spots, and barriers to navigating differences in race, culture, ethnicity, and class. She's the founder of Brave Sis Project, a social cause using storytelling to uplift BIPOC women in history, and author of the Nautilus award-winning book, Our Brave Foremothers, celebrating 100 Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous women who changed the course of history. Her new book in progress is World Brave Sis: 100 Dreamtime Dialogues with Women who led the way. She also launched an online course, Allies, Advocates, Co-Conspirators, Friends, Sisters, a playbook for leading, learning, and liberation, a curriculum for exploring the complexities and possibilities of building authentic collaborations and relationships across differences and isms, incorporating ample space for practicing self-reflection and growth. Please join me in welcoming Rozella Kennedy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I want to start by giving my most sincere thanks to Linda Sariana and, of course, my friend Robin for making this event possible. We've been talking about it for a while, and it's a great way for us to kind of roll into the end of Women's History Month. And also, it is my hope that in sharing story with you, we will also have a little bit of interaction. You'll have some time for reflection and sharing back in the chat if you so desire. It is a webinar setup, so you're not going to be able to pop up on screen. But I hope we'll have some time for some things that you can reflect upon and react to yourself. So I'm just going to take a quick minute to introduce myself, even though that was a very full introduction. I am an author and I do a consultant and thought leader, and I do help individuals, groups, and organizations strategize and hold their practice for sustainable allyship and intercultural IQ. And, the thing that I want to say about that is, it's very often that people say, oh, I'm an ally, I'm an ally. And I really contend one of the highest beliefs I have is that allyship cannot be claimed, it must be earned. And what that means is you want to strive to have the people you're wanting to interact with say to you, I see you, you're an ally, as opposed to saying, well, as an ally, because you don't get to coronate yourself that way. And so and that it's not just for issues of race or gender, that's for sexuality as well, and all the other things that we're thinking about in this moment. So part of my work is to help us feel comfortable having the kinds of real conversations and interactions that will help us move into more trust-built, interreliant spaces. I think we need that. I know it feels almost impossible in this moment, but I always tell people that the person that I was in October and the values that I had last October have not shifted. I'm still that person. We still have those values. We still have those aspirations for coming together. And so I use story as the basis for that. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the origin story of Brave Sis Project, if I may, really quickly. First of all, this is a photo of my mother, who is still alive. We talk every day and yuck it up every day. She's hilarious. And my grandmother, Alice Green, who is no longer with us. But I feel that my grandmother, who we called Lala, was the reason, the sort of force behind this project. Really quickly, in 2019, I'd gone through a really difficult personal time. And I came out of it and I said, I need to have accountability to myself. I want to journal. I want to keep track of my life. And so when I looked on the market, there was nothing that really reflected me. It was all either really sort of like, white women with blonde hair, size zero, and the bamboo pants on the beach, or, the wellness thing. Or it was, black women on the cover with big afros and beautiful illustrious things in their hair, and then you open the book and the pages were just generic and felt like a real bait and switch. It was like beauty on the outside and totally generic inside. So I decided to build my own. I started to create my own journal, and I did 4 years of that. When I first started, I wanted to include important women because on Christmas morning, 2019, a foremother force came to me and said, "Tell our story." And I think it was my grandmother's spirit. And so I jumped out of bed and I was like, I'm going to start harvesting stories of all of these women. And a friend of mine had said, Rosie, watch out with the very commercial names because their estates may want a commission or, you may have to get permission. And indeed, there were a few, I won't name names, but there were a few really famous writers whose estates said, we don't understand this. It's a coloring book, it's a history book, it's a journal, and so then I said, you know what? I'm going to write about people that few people know about. And so that really gave shape to Brave Sis Project. And that really gave me the means to start telling these stories, curating these stories, elevating these little known she-roes in history. They were Black women, brown women, Asian women, and Indigenous women. And some people said, well, why are you doing all those different types of women? It's because I feel an affinity with all of us whose stories are too little told and decentered. And there are plenty of books out there that center white women. So I'm going to kind of cast a light on everyone else, right? And so this activity that I was involved in caught the eye of the folks at Workman Publishing, which is now a division of Hachette, and they assigned me to write this book that came out a year and a half ago, Our Brave Foremothers. So tonight, oh, and the subtitle is celebrating 100 Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous women who changed the course of history. So tonight I'm going to pull from 3 of the 100 stories to give you an opportunity to connect these incredible foremothers to your life and begin thinking of ways to expand your well of inspiration and resilience, right? Because I think the very timely message in these very terrible times that we're living through is many of these women faced worse, but they remained strong and they continue to find a way to make a difference. And so I believe in hope that we can do the same. So let me begin with Ada Blackjack. Ada, and Ada's the first one in my book, and people always say to me, well, do you have a favorite? And that's like asking which child is your favorite. No, I don't. But I do love Ada a lot, and I like that the book started with her. It's not in alphabetical order, but her story, you'll see why I find her story so inspiring. Ada didn't set out to be a castaway and a survivor. This simple living Inupiat woman merely hoped to earn enough money to retrieve her son from the Nome, Alaska orphanage where she'd placed him after a divorce left her penniless. Now, to give you a little more context, I'm going to share a little more about Ada's life that we couldn't actually fit in the book. Um, but I think it's useful to know. This is a photo of a modern day Inupiat family, and they're very happy. It's a lovely portrait. But Ada's life, sadly, was not as delightful. Ada Blackjack was born into impoverishment on May 10th, 1898. Her father died when she was 8 years old, and her mother sent Ada and her sister to a Methodist mission school in Nome, Alaska. And she was raised by missionaries who taught her to read English. Ada got married at age 16 and had 3 children with her husband, only one of whom survived infancy. Now, Ada had been abandoned by her husband, a local dog musher named Jack Blackjack, and he abandoned her on the Seward Peninsula in 1921. This abandonment obligated her to walk the 40 miles back to Nome with her 5-year-old son, Bennett, carrying him on her back when he was too tired to walk. Bennett suffered from tuberculosis and general poor health, and Ada was forced to place him in a local orphanage, vowing that she would find a way to make enough money to bring him back home. And so the Wrangel Island expedition that she would soon join promised a salary of $50 a month, an amount that was to Blackjack an unheard of sum. So, for context, at the same time that European colonizers were rushing to divide up Africa and Asia, the Russians, Canadians, British, and Americans were seeking to plunder the riches of the northernmost parts of the globe. And in 1914, an expeditioner named Ville Hjalmar Stefansson created or organized the Canadian Arctic Expedition. Stefansson sent 5 settlers, one European Canadian, three European Americans, and one Inupiat, Ada, on a speculative mission to claim the island for Canada. The explorers were handpicked by Stephenson based upon their previous experience and academic credentials. Stephenson considered those with advanced knowledge in the fields of geography and other sciences for the expedition, but they lacked awareness of the land and did not expect it to be so barren and devoid of big game for hunting. And for good luck, the expeditioners brought along a feline mascot. And now I'll go back to reading from the book. Located above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, Wrangel Island is the last place on Earth where woolly mammoths lived some 4,000 years ago. In the early 1900s, it became the subject of international geopolitical conquest. Though she had no wilderness experience, Ada accepted the job of cook and seamstress on what became a disastrous colonizing expedition. She and the four men set off for the large and barren island in September 1921. Once they reached their destination, they discovered bleak and inhospitable land. As their sojourn carried forth, the explorers found themselves with dwindling rations, scarce game for hunting, and without hope that any rescue ship could penetrate the thick winter ice. The long and frigid Arctic winters brought the party to the brink of starvation, and by the beginning of 1923, they were desperate. Three of the men set off for help one morning, never to be seen again. Ada was left with the one other crew member, scurvy sick adventurer Lorne Knight. And though Ada learned to hunt and trap and administered medical care, Knight was verbally abusive. And these images are of the camp and Ada in winter gear removing blubber from a sealskin. So, under such duress, Ada's will to survive kicked in. Perhaps the Inupiat ways of knowing and living imparted to her by her forebears were awakened within her. Her hunting skills improved. She erected a lookout platform from driftwood so she could watch out for polar bears, and she even used animal carcasses to rebuild the wrecked boat. When Ada was finally rescued in August 1923, crew members said she could have survived another year. Not that anyone wanted that. And this photo is a similar image to what rescue might have looked like, right? In the book, the only images are the illustrations of the women, such as you saw at the top of this presentation. Anyway, after the celebration died down, Ada was accused of exaggerating her story, and the speculator who commissioned the expedition became famous for his account of the ordeal, even though he hadn't been there. And I want to add, just parenthetically, another bit from my research. Blackjack was at first celebrated as an Alaskan Robinson Crusoe upon her return, but soon there was a backlash. Smear campaigns against her character emerged, claiming that she had callously refused to care for Knight, which her diary and importantly her own values and word refuted. But Ada didn't have social power, so she mostly remained silent in the face of the abuse. And more frustratingly, Blackjack saw none of the money that Stephenson reaped for his storytelling. Thankfully, Ada was reunited with Bennett, and she used her payment from her time on Wrangel Island, which was much less than she'd been promised, to seek treatment for his tuberculosis in a Seattle hospital. And now I'll go back to the book to say her life story had happy moments, but not a happy ending. And as I wrote, Blackjack saw none of that money, and Ada Blackjack's own diary fell into obscurity for many years, and she remained destitute for much of her life. Okay, so that's a sad story. It has a sad ending, but it has a happy middle and it has a lot of meaning. And so what I'd like to do is to just take a little 3-minute break here to ask each of you to think about, and you can just think about it. And if you want, you can put it in the chat and we can talk about it. You can speak into the space that way. But what's a recent example of resilience in your life or that of someone that you've heard about that inspires you? And so I'm going to try to put back on some music through my phone and we'll see if you can hear it. But we have a 3-minute timer just so you can have a little breathing time and reflection moment.
I think people are just getting warmed up with the storytelling. We don't have anything in the chat so far.
Okay. Thank you for that. And that's fine. Well, in that case, it's totally fine. This is always the joy of the hybrid event. I'm going to pause the timer and go back to the presentation. And if there are any folks who want to share a story of resilience in your life or that life of someone, I mean, I would say I think we are all living it in real time, getting up every day and going about our life with, so many people being touched in this moment by some of the chaos that we're living through and lots of folks working in humanitarian and other areas, philanthropy, who are finding their way of life totally usurped. And, I think one of the things, again, that I'll say about these times and these foremothers, and you'll see this in the book, many of them went through, situations that were life-threatening. And they just were so inspired by the mission that they had that they kept going. Others we're not up against life and death odds. So we're going to move on and talk about the next person that I'd like to read from, which is Martha Louise Morrow Fox. Though Martha Louise Morrow Fox lost most of her vision during infancy, neither she nor her parents expected her dreams to diminish. Born in North Carolina and raised in Philadelphia, Martha was well aware of the deprivation that sharecroppers and other descendants of enslaved people suffered. She enrolled at Temple University in 1927, and after her first year there, she was offered a role as teacher and principal at the brand new Mississippi Blind School for Negroes at the Piney Woods School in rural Rankin County. Now, the Piney Woods School was founded in 1909 with little more than a Bible and the determination of a man named Lawrence Clifton Jones to redress the county's 80% illiteracy level. Mississippi's difficult agricultural conditions, including punishing heat and poor soil, contributed to a high poverty level, and the rise of racist hate crimes in the South made it a dangerous place to try to advocate for African American advancement. Martha was dedicated to the call and applied herself to teaching and providing round-the-clock care for 10 blind students. She ministered not only to their intellectual needs, but to their moral and spiritual needs as well. She developed self-reliance in all of her students, so that they could eagerly look forward to the time when they could support themselves out in the world, said Jones. Martha developed a rigorous early form of experimental education, foraging wild berries in the woods, reading Braille, and studying music. She also ensured that her students were prepared to enter the classroom with sighted students once they reached high school. 4 of her alums formed a musical group called the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, not to be confused with the Blind Boys of Alabama. Okay. And eventually, the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi found crossover success on what was then called the Gospel Jubilee Hit Parade. And I didn't want to test the limits of Zoom tech by playing a video of them in this presentation, but I do recommend you finding them on YouTube and giving it a listen. You'll start to hear this crossover from old-timey gospel to rhythm and blues morphing into early rock and roll. It's kind of wonderful. Helen Keller also visited the school and praised its success. Martha was recognized for the educational legacy she helped create, winning the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Drama Award in 1942 and the Mississippi Teacher Association Award for Outstanding Teacher of the Year in 1969, the same year she retired. The Piney Woods School is the largest African American boarding school today and the second oldest continuously operating African American boarding school in the United States. And a little side note that is not in the book, Hulu recently released a documentary about the Piney Woods School. And it's not about the history as much as the today, but it provides a wonderful glimpse into the lives of young people striving for Black excellence in the Deep South. The kids from Piney Woods and all of us owe a major debt of gratitude to visionary educators like Martha Louise Morrow Fox. And I would love to give you all some more reflection time to think about, who is an educator or other change maker who is hardly known about, but who made a huge difference in your life or that of someone you care about. And I won't play the music now because that makes me nervous, but we have 3 minutes for you to give it some thought. And I also see there may be some questions in the chat, and we'll get to those after the timer stops. So let's take a little breathing time to think about change makers and educators who have meant a lot to you and why.
Chat's at the bottom of the screen. You can hopefully open that up um, and just type directly into the chat screen.
Just about a minute left for reflection, so.
I'm going to read a couple things
Right,
in the
yeah,
chat.
let's definitely do that.
Yeah, Tiffany McElroy, who's also a member of the Racial Equity Committee, said Isabella Wilkerson's books and talks have introduced me to Black American history that I never knew about. Yes, her book and film Cast and The Warmth of Other Suns are both amazing. And Linda Kenton, our director of the San Anselmo Library, says Senior Loretta, Senor, is that, I'm not sure what SR means in
You're
third grade.
or sister. Is it sister?
Sister. You can tell I'm not Catholic. In third grade, compassionate and a wonderful woman. And Barbara Killy, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Melba Beale's daughter, is a neighbor. So we had the honor of having her mother, Melba, talk to our book club. After her horrific experience as part of the Little Rock Nine, she was still one of the most positive people I've ever heard.
Mm.
Despite age and health challenges, she has never given up on the goodness of people and how it can be developed. It was one of the most inspirational hours of my life. Wow, that sounds amazing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. Thank you for that. That's just so moving because that's really kind of what it's all about, right? And I mean, I mean, you're all involved with a library, so you know the importance of history and facts and honesty and keeping information going. And it's just so sorrowful that, these women from the Little Rock Nine and Ruby Bridges and others, they're still very much alive, a lot of them, and their stories are not known, and they just live through their life as the next door neighbor or, a kind old person that we know. And then they have these amazing histories that have enriched our society so much. And that is a perfect segue into the final person that I would like to share about, which is Florence Ebersole Finch. Now, I love this story, and I hope you noticed I had a Native American woman, an Inupiat woman, a Black American woman, and now this is a Filipina woman. Um, I think it's, I want to say something. When I first started this, a couple of people, said to me, well, I don't even like this word BIPOC, and, why isn't it just Black women? And I totally respect that, and I totally understand. BIPOC is a shorthand word. I use it with quotes. It doesn't capture the fullness of, you know, all of the different cultural, ethnic, and racial expressions that we could be exploring and learning about. I recognize that. And I also wanted to say, and I have said to people, if you don't like the approach of my book, go write your own. Go research your own people. This is an invitation to become more curious and inquisitive about folks around us. So this was my attempt at it, and I hope rather it inspires people to learn more about folks in their life, community, and even possibly family who they don't know. And so I'm going to close with this story that I love because it really demonstrates how that there are so many heroes and she-roes living quietly amongst us even today. And so with that, I want to introduce you to World War II heroine Florence Ebersole Finch. Because she had a white American father, Florence Ebersole Finch passed as a white woman even though her mother was Filipina. The privilege that accompanied her physical appearance allowed her to land a key strategic assignment as an underground agent in the Philippine resistance in Manila during World War II. At the Japanese-controlled Philippine Liquid Fuel Distributing Union, her job was to write out the vouchers for gasoline, diesel, and other fuel. Florence had a personal grudge against the invading Japanese as her American husband had been killed on the battlefield in the war. So, eager to help the Allied forces, she secretly redirected fuel, food, medicine, and supplies to American prisoners of war and freedom fighters. Now, the next slide depicts emaciated war prisoners, so I've edited it slightly to make it a little less visually jarring. But if so, it is disturbing. Please just turn your eyes away for a few moments. I've done my best to try to, you know, make it be a little less stark. Japanese authorities captured Florence in October 1944 and sent her to a prison camp near Manila, where she was confined to a 2 by 4 foot space, underfed and repeatedly shocked with electric probes. Still, she never revealed the identities of her fellow resistors. Now I'll go back to more palatable images. When American forces liberated the prison camp in 1945, Florence weighed a mere 80 pounds. Once freed, Florence left the Philippines for her father's hometown of Buffalo, New York. Yet she was determined to continue the fight, and so she enlisted in the Coast Guard Women's Reserve. And finally, World War II ended, and she relocated to Ithaca, New York, with her second husband, hoping to spend the rest of her days in obscurity and peace. The US government did not intend for the hero to go unrecognized, however. In 1946, she became the first woman to be awarded the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal. And the following year, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor an American civilian can earn. And in 1955, the U.S. Coast Guard named its new Honolulu headquarters after her. Despite all her accolades, Florence Ebersole Finch kept a humble and low profile. When she passed away at the age of 101, her neighbors were amazed to learn about her illustrious history. And the photo on the left is of her 100th birthday, which she celebrated with her extended family in Ithaca, New York. And then the other is a photo of her enjoying her latter years in an elder living community. A coda to the story. In 2024, the U.S. Coast Guard commissioned a Sentinel class first response cutter ship that they named the USCGC Florence Finch. And so, again, I invite you to take a little bit of time to think about some unsung heroes or she-roes and why they are important to you. And they need not be famous at all. And I don't know how we're doing with time in terms of the
We've
3
got
minutes.
lots of time. It's
Yeah.
7:11.
Yep.
Mhm.
So we can take a few more minutes now, and if anyone wants to drop anything in the chat, that's fine. The other thing we can do, I have room for Q&A, but another thing that I could do, since we do have a lot of time, so I could read from the intro of the book, if you would like to understand how these stories relate to my life and hopefully your life. So we can do that as well. But let's take a little time now and see if there are any comments about unsung heroes and she-roes that people would like to share.
Well, there's definitely some more stories that I may have missed about educators that changed people's lives.
Oh,
And I want to give a shout out to Sariana's band teacher, Mr. Peabody. He encouraged all of us in band and choir to be ourselves. And Indy Young says, definitely, field bio teacher at Livermore High School changed my life philosophy, introduced me to Indigenous wildflower names, care for wildlife and ecosystems. Wow, her name is Marilyn Russell. I talked about my Latin teacher who taught me Latin, but also took me to my college tours. And then also Tammy Herndon, who is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the town of Mill Valley. She put in the Director of Student Services at the Mill Valley School District, Laura Myers, who started the 1 Mile Project, bringing students together from Marin City and Mill Valley. And Brenda Brown says, I was shy and awkward in my all-girls high school, but a teacher called me aside one day and said she thought I was bright. I had never heard that before. I realized how she helped my self-confidence through her words and now realize how important it was to see the real person beyond the facade. that we sometimes see in our students. It's great.
Oh,
And there's a question
sure.
from Ruth Ann Binder. Ms. Kennedy, can you kindly share how you researched, and found out about these remarkable women?
Yes, I'm happy to share that. And I get asked that question a lot. And so when I started thinking about these women, at first, as I said, I started thinking of the sort of all stars, right? Zora Neale Hurstons and Billie Holidays and all those people. And then my friend said, you know, Rosie, you got to be careful. Their estates might want money, and it's true. And I won't say who, but a very famous American poet who once spoke at a presidential inauguration, her and no longer with us, her estate said, well, we'll charge you $500 for every 1,000 copies of your book that you sell, something like that. And I was funding this amount of my pocket, and I was like, oh well, we're not going to do that. And so that's when I started looking at women who most of us hadn't heard of. And there are a few in the book that people have certainly heard of. But what I learned over time is that there are some conventions around educational purposes as opposed to, commercial. I wasn't making t-shirts and merch per se. So I could have gone with the more famous people, but once I sort of opened the door to the folks who were less known, the women who were less known and the women identifying people, um, my main criterion was I wanted to focus on women who had passed away because as we've seen with some folks such as the freedom fighter from Myanmar or Daniel Ortega from Nicaragua, for example, sometimes people who we hold up as heroes, later in life, they turn and become not the thing that we thought. So being not alive was a big component. So how did I find these people? I started researching all over the place, and it remains a really fun game. I got a couple of amazing big books called American Black Americans Women Anthology, and they're all like this thick. And I started flipping through them, and a lot of the stories were like she was the first, nurse at the school in the city of so and so. I mean, that's interesting, but not that interesting. And I started pulling interesting names and stories that were fascinating to me. I started talking to people that I knew and saying, who in your culture should I know about? Like for about 6 months, everywhere I went, I was asking people, help me harvest names. I started building a lot of this on Instagram, and you can go to the Instagram. I'll share that in a minute. And scroll down, and you'll see I was doing birthday shout outs every day for like 2 or 3 years. It was a lot of labor. And I ended up with the spreadsheet of about 400 names, right? And it keeps growing. And when I got the contract with Workman Hachette, they were like, okay, of the 100 women, only 15 of them could have been people that you already had written about in one of your journals. And I was on like year 3 of the journal by then. So I had to do a lot of digging to find stories that were interesting, that were representative of different periods of time, that were representative of different ethnicities and um, what do I want to say? Careers. They couldn't all be doctors, they couldn't all be performers. And so it was really like an extraordinary puzzle and kind of conundrum to solve. I loved it. It was great. Then what happened was, as we started working on the book, Cicely Tyson passed away. And here she is. Oh, you're not going to be able to see it because of there she is in the orange right there. You see a little bit, that's Cicely. And I called my editor and I said, Cicely Tyson's dead. Let's add her. And so we took someone out. And it was just wonderful for me to be in that kind of deep moment of exploration and learning the stories. And the other thing that I'll say is like these little vignettes are very, they're short. They're a 2-page spread. So I couldn't say a lot about them. I had to be very succinct. And in fact, that was one of the hardest parts of writing the book. Also, we needed 3 sources on everything. So when people tell you history isn't real, don't believe them. We had to source each thing 3 times. Fact checking was outrageous because some of these women, there's very little about them in the public record. You could, and I was not traveling across the United States to go to every archive. It was what I could find digitally in many cases. And so it was a lot of fun to put it together. And I have a backup list. I had more people who I wanted to add, and now I'm working on a new book, which is similar. And I'll talk about that more in a second, but it's about women from around the world, from different countries who've made amazing impacts in their life. And I'm writing it like imagined interviews with these women. It's an incredibly holy kind of mystical experience. I learn about them and I kind of channel, and we have this conversation that exists outside of time. And it's like the greatest thing I've ever done. And that's really different because for those women, I'm writing it. I don't have a publisher yet. And so, each interview is like 15 pages because we're talking about life and their times and what they know and what they observe from their ether land about us today and what we need to know. And so it's just, it's become my favorite thing to do, really, is just live with these women and research and more about them and what they have to teach us, what they have for us. That's really the important part. I don't want to write an academic book. I want to write things that people can use in their own life and find utility and joy and inspiration from. Long answer.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's some really great comments in the chat, and Linda Kenton has a question about describing your process for writing. Do you write every day for a certain amount of time? Are you more freestyle in your process? I loved what you said about writing your new book. It's like you're channeling.
It's so amazing. I do not have the luxury of writing. I am not, sadly, I'm not, a self-made woman with all this money that I can just sit around and write all day. I have to work like everyone else. And so, it's always a challenge. I don't have a practice of sitting down. Maybe I will in some time in the future, sitting down every day and writing. But as Robin knows, and anyone who knows me knows, I am a storyteller. I always have something to say. I always have something to engage in conversation about. So when I go in, I can just dive right in it. And so, for example, with this new book project, I'm writing a book. I released an online course, which is like a book except digital. So I'm creating all this content and different things, and I just set aside time and I do it. I'm doing some consulting right now for a school here in Seattle. It's taken up a lot of my time, but yesterday I was like, okay, I'm working 3 hours for them, and the rest of the day I'm going to write because this woman is calling to me. She's saying, Rosie, come on, let's have our conversation. And I knew once I started, I would be going until 11 o'clock at night because I just like go in the zone. So for me, it's very organic. And I share that with people because I think sometimes as writers or creative folks or folks who aspire to have a more creative life, we think that we have to create a very rigid set of parameters around how we do what we do. And you don't. Just do it. Do it when you can because you want to do it because you can't not. That's my real world advice to all of us as we continue to find ways to express ourselves and our meaning in the world.
I want to give a shout out to your online courses. I took a course with Rosie last summer around creating beloved community. And that term comes from Martin Luther King's call to, that we can and we should create beloved community. And I think we're all, very much wanting that now. And I want to just read this comment from Jane Hall. You're bringing these women's lives of such difficulty is even more vital right now. Thank you, Rozella. The efforts going on now to remove every bit of progress, no. My great grandmother has had nothing at the end of their very hard lives of constant back-breaking labor. Thank you for sharing that, Jane.
And like I said, my grandmother, Alice Green, she died at age, I'm gonna say she was not even 50. Maybe she wasn't 60. She's younger than I was and than I am. And she died of congestive heart failure. And like a few years ago, like a decade ago, so in my early late 40s, early 50s, I was having all these issues, and I went to see the heart doctor and I was fine. It's a lot of stress. But I saw on a poster on the wall, a poster about congestive heart failure, and it said, congestive heart failure is not a death sentence. Da, da, da. And it just like hit me like a gut punch because I was like, my grandmother died young because they didn't care about her life. And it's just like, and the disparities in healthcare for Black women, especially, right, are incredible. And that is like a real story that I experienced in my actual life as a human being, that this woman right here, the one seated down, died way too young because her life didn't matter to people. And yet she lives on because she inspired me to do this project, right? And that's the thread that I think we can all pull a little bit of inspiration from. And, you know, um, they didn't live their lives in vain, and nor do we, because we're doing it for those who come behind. I will take this moment to share the link for the website, bravesis.com, which is sort of the hub of all the stuff. It's got all the cute little things. The Instagram, like I said, I don't engage in social media as much anymore now as I used to because I'm just like, I'm a refusenik. But if you go to Instagram and scroll down and scroll down and scroll down, you will see when I used to do these daily shout outs of all these women. It was very, very good. It was different than the book because I had no space constraints or whatever. I could include videos and images. And then my regular website, rozellakennedy.com, is kind of like the hub for all the things I do. That's where you'll find out, oh, the images don't want to show up. That's terribly sad. The new the new book project, because you're not seeing the images, or are you seeing the images? Are you seeing 3 images?
Yep, we
You're
are.
seeing a woman with a dog talking to a little
Yep.
puppy? Great,
Hmm.
excellent. Not on my screen, but great on
Hmm.
yours. That's the new book I'm working on, and you can read about it there, rozellakennedy.com book project. I will say, you're book lovers. I don't have a publisher or anything yet, but I don't care. I'm writing it anyway. And the thing that Robin was talking about, just to give you the final bit, at the beginning, um, I had said this idea that allyship cannot be earned, it cannot be claimed. So I have this little hashtag learn to earn through my course. And you can look at the links there and we can follow up if you're interested. If you go to bit.ly ally free course, it might be
Yep.
free. It might be free ally course. I can't remember. So I have to check. You can do the first 3 chapters for free, or you can get the whole thing with a 25% off code respect. It's important for us to keep learning and striving to be better and build more understanding with each other. I think it's really a key piece. And I've tried to use the book and the stories and this idea of story sharing to create a non-confrontational and joy-filled and heartfelt and collaborative and like campfire circle joyful loving way for us all to step into this idea that if I didn't know about these 100 women, who else did I not know about? Who else's stories weren't known to us? Who else's voice could bring value? Who matters? So that's really why I do what I do. And I know we have a couple more minutes if there are any last questions or thoughts.
Yeah, there's a question about the library system, and I'll pass that to Sariana and Linda, and where to buy your books that are not Amazon. So I'll go off now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Robin. I will say RuPaul's website, Allstora, ALLSTORA, allstora.com, does have my book. They carry books by BIPOC and LGBTQ authors. And the cute thing about that is they pay out 50% of all sales to the authors right away, as opposed to waiting until third printing, which is like, who even knows what year that'll be when the royalties will. So that's one place, but any bookshop really, it's in real stores. So let's see.
So
Uh,
I just posted the Alstora link in the chat. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, oh, sorry. Um,
Wow, I'm just looking at some of these stories too in the chat now that I'm finally not sharing. This is beautiful. Can I just say, Sariana, this is what it's all about. And I love to do, this is the thing I love the most, right? I think we all got lots of warm tinglies thinking, not just listening to me, but the impetus to think about people who meant something to you in your life, and then to share it and say their name out loud and give them a little bit of glory. It feels so much better than what we have to deal with every day when we look in our news feeds and it's so negative and it's so restrictive and it's so hopeless. Got to remember there's a lot of strength, and it's a great way to embody the vision and the beauty of Women's History Month. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for doing this with us tonight, Rosella. And in answer to the library, getting the book in the library systems, we do have a few non-Amazon websites that we use to get books from the library. So if you check out books from the library, we're good. But yeah.
Thank
I want to
you.
thank everyone for coming tonight. A special thank you to everyone from the San Anselmo Racial Equity Committee for all of your help in putting this wonderful program together. And again, thank you, Rosie, for a wonderful talk.
I want to say one last thing. I
Yes.
just remembered it exists in audio version as well, and I only knew it through Audible, but I know it's in other places as well. And one of the really fun parts of this project for me was I got to actually listen to the three author audition, the voice artist audition snippets, and pick the one that I thought sounded the most like my personality. And of course, the editor had final call, but we agreed. But it was so cool to listen to the audio version as well, to hear my voice, my words with someone else's voice. It's a
Can't
surreal moment.
imagine. I can't imagine that. I believe it's a surreal moment. I can't imagine
It was
actually
wild.
living that. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's woo. Again,
Great.
thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you, thank you. And I did read Rosie's book. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Thank you for calling out these three amazing women. But yeah, I'll return my book tomorrow.
Have a beautiful night, everyone. Thank you all so very much. It's been though I couldn't see you, I felt you, and it's uplifting for me too because we're all going through it together. So thanks, folks. Let's stay strong and stay brave, you know. That's it.
All right. I
Cool.
hope everybody has a lovely evening, and I hope we see you all in the library soon. Happy reading.